In a small town tucked away from the busy city life, lived a rancher named Jack. He was a man who lived mostly alone, working on his ranch and keeping to himself. His ranch was located far from the town center, surrounded by wide open fields and a few scattered trees. He found peace in the quiet, and it was all he had known for many years. Jack was the kind of man who didn't speak much. His days were filled with hard work, caring for the animals, and managing the land that had been in his family for generations. The land was everything to him, and Jack was used to being alone, not bothered by the lack of company. He had never been a social man, and he was content with his routine. But all that changed one day when he decided to go into town for something other than supplies. It was a regular trip, but something about this day felt different. Jack had no idea that it would mark the beginning of a new chapter in his life. He had been thinking a lot about the future lately, even though he didn't know what that future would look like. As he walked through the town's market, he noticed a lot of activity. The townspeople were bustling around buying goods, chatting with each other, and sharing the news of the day. Jack passed by the market stalls, his mind lost in thought, when he noticed something strange. A small crowd had gathered around a woman and a little girl. The girl stood near a cart, her clothes ragged and torn, her small frame hunched with sadness. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, but there was something about her that caught Jack's attention. It wasn't just her appearance, though her tattered clothes told a story of their own. It was the look in her eyes, the way she held herself. There was a kind of sadness there that Jack couldn't ignore. As Jack approached the crowd, he overheard the woman speaking to the girl, though he couldn't make out the words. But the girl's response was clear as day. "Can you buy her instead of me?" she asked. The question struck Jack in the chest, and for a moment he was frozen in place. He didn't understand it, but he knew that whatever was happening, it wasn't good. The woman standing with the girl looked stunned by the question, her face showing confusion and disbelief. She didn't know how to respond, and neither did Jack. He stepped closer, his instincts telling him to intervene, though he wasn't sure what kind of help the girl needed. Jack didn't want to make a scene, but his heart couldn't ignore the girl's voice. Without thinking, he walked up to the woman and asked, "Is everything all right?" His voice was calm, but there was an underlying concern there that he couldn't hide. The woman turned to face him, her expression softening as she spoke. She's been through so much," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Her family, they're gone. She's alone now." Jack's heart sank as he looked down at the little girl who now avoided his gaze. The weight of her words lingered in the air, and Jack could see the girl's pain. It was evident in the way she stood, how she clutched her arms close to her chest. It was as if she was trying to protect herself from the world, from the life she had been given, the life that had taken everything from her. The girl's eyes met Jack's for the briefest moment, and there was a flicker of something there, something that spoke volumes without words. Jack didn't know why, but he knew that this moment was important. Something deep inside him urged him to do something. "I'll take her," Jack said, his voice steady and calm, though inside he was filled with uncertainty. The woman looked at him, her expression one of disbelief and hesitation. But Jack didn't waver. He knew that he couldn't just walk away. He had to do something. After a brief moment of silence, the woman nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said quietly, almost as if she were relieved. And just like that, it was decided. Jack now found himself responsible for a little girl he didn't know. A girl who had been abandoned by the world, left to fend for herself in the harshest of conditions. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills, handing them over to the woman. She took them with a shaky hand, but her expression softened as she nodded in appreciation. Without another word, the woman turned and walked away, leaving Jack alone with the girl. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt heavy, and Jack wasn't sure how to start a conversation. He didn't even know the girl's name yet. But before he could say anything, the girl spoke up in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jack," he replied simply. "And you are?" "Lily," she answered, her voice still quiet but a little stronger now. It was the first time Jack had heard her speak without hesitation. "All right, Lily," Jack said, trying to sound reassuring. "Let's get you out of here." Without saying another word, Jack led Lily away from the market. The walk back to his ranch was a quiet one. Jack didn't know what to say, and neither did Lily. But as they made their way down the dusty road, Jack couldn't help but notice how different everything seemed. The wind felt cooler, the air sharper, as if everything had shifted. Jack was no longer just a man on his ranch. He was now responsible for someone else's life. Someone who had no one left. When they finally reached the ranch, Jack led Lily inside. The house was simple, made of wood and stone, with a small hearth that provided warmth. It was a place of solitude, but it was all Jack had ever known. He wondered how this little girl with her sad eyes and broken heart would fit into his quiet life. "Do you want something to eat?" Jack asked, though he wasn't sure if Lily was hungry. She nodded slowly, and Jack moved to prepare something simple. He wasn't sure what she liked, but he hoped it would be enough. As he cooked, Jack found himself thinking about everything that had led him to this point. He hadn't expected his life to change today, but somehow it had, and as much as Jack tried to prepare himself, he knew there was no going back. This little girl, Lily, had come into his life for a reason, and he was determined to figure out what that reason was. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt something other than the emptiness of solitude. It was a strange feeling, a feeling he wasn't sure he understood. But one thing was clear: his life would never be the same again. The days that followed Jack's decision to bring Lily into his home were filled with quiet adjustments. At first, there was an awkwardness between them. Jack didn't know how to talk to her or what to do to help her feel at ease. Lily, in turn, seemed unsure of her place in his home. She wandered around the ranch with a look of uncertainty in her eyes, as if she were still waiting for someone to tell her that it was time to leave. But over time, Jack began to notice small changes. Lily started to speak more often, though her words were still soft and measured, as though she were unsure whether she should be speaking at all. She would ask him simple questions about the ranch, the animals, or the land, things that Jack had always known, but never thought to explain to anyone. Each time she spoke, Jack felt a bit more comfortable with the situation. He realized that he couldn't just be a protector. He had to be a guide as well. Jack showed Lily how to care for the animals. He taught her how to feed the horses, how to milk the cows, and how to tend to the chickens. She was a quick learner, her small hands working diligently under his guidance. The more they worked together, the more Jack saw her confidence grow. Lily began to smile more, though the smile was often fleeting, like it was still a foreign expression for her. One afternoon, as they were tending to the cattle, Lily asked Jack something that took him by surprise. "Why did you take me in?" Her voice was hesitant, unsure, but there was an honesty in her question that made Jack pause. Jack looked at her for a moment, trying to find the right words. He wasn't a man who often talked about his feelings, but he felt like this was a moment where words mattered. "I don't really know," Jack began slowly. "I guess I just couldn't leave you there. I saw something in you, something that reminded me of myself, maybe. I've been alone for a long time, Lily, and maybe I wasn't meant to stay that way." Lily looked down at the ground, her fingers tracing the dirt. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said quietly. Jack felt a pang of sadness. He knew that Lily had no family left, no place to call home. But he also knew that he couldn't promise her everything. The ranch wasn't much, but it was all he had to offer. "You have a home here now," Jack said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "You don't have to go anywhere, not as long as you want to stay." It was a simple promise, but it meant more than words could convey. Lily looked up at him, her eyes wide, and for the first time, Jack saw a glimmer of something in her gaze. Hope, perhaps, or trust. Whatever it was, it made him feel like he had done the right thing. As the weeks went by, Jack and Lily settled into a routine. The ranch felt different now. There was a new energy in the air. It wasn't just the animals or the land that Jack cared for now. It was Lily too. She wasn't just a girl he had brought into his home. She was becoming a part of his life in ways he hadn't anticipated. One evening, as they sat down to a simple meal by the fire, Jack watched Lily as she ate. She was quiet as usual, but there was something different about her now. She was more at ease, less guarded. She had started to laugh, though it was a small, shy laugh, but it was still a sound that filled the house with warmth. After dinner, Jack set about cleaning up the dishes, but he paused when he heard Lily speak again. "Jack?" she said, her voice soft but filled with curiosity. "Yeah?" Jack turned to look at her. "I've never had a family before," she said, her words slow, almost as if she were testing them out. "Not like this." Jack's heart swelled at her words, but he didn't know how to respond. He had always been alone, and now that she was here, he didn't know how to act. Was he a father to her? A protector, a friend? It was hard to say. He wasn't sure he could be any of those things in the way she might have wanted, but he could be someone who cared. That much was clear. "You have a family now, Lily," Jack said quietly. "Maybe not the kind you thought you'd have, but it's real. I promise you that." Lily didn't say anything for a moment. She just looked at him, her eyes thoughtful as if she were trying to understand what he meant. Then, without another word, she turned her attention back to her plate and continued eating. Jack finished cleaning up and sat down next to her. The fire crackled softly in the background, casting a warm glow on the walls. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was simply the quiet of two people learning to live with one another. That night, as Jack lay in bed, he thought about the life he had led before Lily arrived. It had been quiet, simple, and predictable, but now things were different. The ranch felt fuller, the air seemed lighter, and even the nights were warmer. There was still so much unknown about their future together, but for the first time in a long while, Jack wasn't afraid. He didn't know what would happen in the coming months or years. He didn't know what the world outside the ranch would bring. But he knew one thing for certain. Lily was no longer just a little girl he had taken in. She was his responsibility, and in a way, she had become his family. Over the next few months, Jack continued to teach Lily about life on the ranch, and she grew into it more and more. She became more confident, more self-assured. She learned to ride a horse, milk cows, and tend to the crops. But there were still moments when the past seemed to haunt her, when the shadow of what she had lost crept into her thoughts. One day, Jack asked her about her past, about her family. He didn't want to push her, but he needed to understand. "I don't want to remember," Lily said, her voice tinged with sadness. "It hurts too much." Jack didn't press her any further. He knew that healing took time, and he wasn't going to rush it. He would be there for her whenever she was ready. In the quiet of the ranch, as the days turned into months, Jack and Lily found their rhythm. The past was never truly gone. It lived in the quiet moments, in the pauses between words. But the future, Jack realized, was something they could create together, and so they did.